Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster. Welcome back. In my speeches, I tend to digress, but my digressions are meant to be helpful and not dilatory. On Thursday, I told a friend of mine, I'll call him Mark, that I was going to give a speech here on Saturday to the Parliamentary Procedure Group. And he had a story, his own story about parliamentary procedure, the value of it as he saw it. And I've actually come up with a little song that describes his feelings also. His story was that all the meetings that he's attended, parliamentary procedure just slows them up. It results in nothing getting done and being a waste of time. Because people are always asking, does that need a second? Did someone second that? Can we amend an amendment? A bunch of things that he thinks are not relevant to a group of people that actually want to accomplish something in this world. I'm going to come back to our response, our story, and our song. If he did write a song about parliamentary procedure, and I did run this by him, it might be a version of the third verse of the Hobo's Lullaby. Do parliamentarians cause you trouble? They cause trouble everywhere. Soon you'll die and go to heaven. There'll be no parliamentarians there. That's his version of what parliamentary procedure is about. I think we would agree that we disagree. I had a couple of things I was going to read, and what I'm going to do is just sum up the first one because we can't be reading here forever. The thought I had that I wanted to share with you was a story about our survival, why we're here today, why about a third of our cities are not uninhabitable. And I think we know that in would be 1960, 1962, we had the Cuban Missile Crisis. I was at Fort Leonard Wood and thought the problem was whether we would get sent to Cuba to fight. It was whether we would have a home to go back to. We got through that, but in the early 80s, now we look back and Republicans are very big on saying, well, Reagan destroyed the USSR. Well, people in the USSR, just like some people here, thought, yeah, this fellow does want to destroy this place, and he might literally attack our country. And just like here, people thought, why don't we use our weapons first? If we destroy their weapons, we might not even have to destroy all their cities. So they were worried about this. In the 1980s, this was really a high concern for them. And you can say, well, no, they really weren't that afraid. Well, that's they just have to be. Remember that minister just last week shot his granddaughter. Said, I was afraid it was a burglar. Well, these people are afraid of nuclear war. A fellow named Stanislav Petrov, speaking a language that we don't, with a different alphabet than us, was a member of the military there. And his job was to monitor satellite activity and watch for things going on that might be attacks on the Soviet Union, on the USSR. And he saw his screen lit up, turned all red. He said it made there was a lot of noise, and it looked like 5 missiles had been launched toward his country. Now, we can look back at the Vietnam War and we say, well, we're not going to get involved in a war like that again. Well, they look back at 1941. You remember Operation Barbarossa, where the Germans attacked. And that said that they could have been better prepared. They didn't have to let the Germans conquer most of their country before they struck back. They could have done better, and so they didn't want this to happen again. But this fellow Stanislav Petrov saw this going on. He checked to see whether the local radar stations had any activity. They didn't have any activity. And in the story that I read, they said if he pushed this red button, that would have been nuclear war. I read further, if you put the man who saved the world by doing nothing into Google, you'll find his name, and they said, well, actually it would have sent a message to higher ups that they were being attacked. And this article said that probably would have been good enough. It would have been pretty much the same thing as ordering an attack, because that's what the world was like. And he was rather modest about this. I think his attitude was that he didn't really want to take responsibility for starting World War III, because I think that was generally his attitude. He wasn't going to start that carelessly, because it turned out to be a malfunction. The computers in Russia were really in bad shape, and he said, I was the right person there at the right time. The person writing this article said, you know, it was a little more than that. You may have done nothing, but in this case it might have been the hardest thing to do. His reward was that his actions embarrassed the Soviet military. He was retired from the service at $200 a month. And when his story came out 15 years later, he became, the United Nations rewarded him as with the World Citizen Award.